Alright, so as I mentioned before, going on to Sunshine Cleaning, this was another one that I kind of hated when I first saw it when it came out. But I was sort of eager to revisit it because it is that territory where, obviously I always get excited when Blunt is going into a more comedic area because she does that so well. Which doesn't seem to get quite as much of attention as how well she does with drama, so it's always kind of an exciting area, but obviously this movie is got a bit of a genre problem, so that's great while it lasts, but it does have some jumping around to do. But if anything else, she is able to keep up with it, even if the script itself kind of can't seem to. So clearly, it's about the two sisters, her and Amy Adams, and it's nothing we haven't really seen before, where Blunt is, the fuck up and the bad influence, and she's like basically chronically annoyed with life and has this waitress job that she might as well quit. might as well quit. Alan Arkin comes in to tell her that she's late for work and they're calling, and her response is, "I'm sleeping, go away." Just for her to go right into work and immediately get fired for tripping and dumping a tray on the floor. Not that she really seems to care, though, because it is a very grand exit on her way out the door, one that she clearly has been wanting to make for a while. So, so it looks like, in contrast, the Amy Adams character is going to be the perfect one, the one that's much more hardworking and has a lot more to deal with, is more responsible, is getting laid regularly. We kind of learn that Blunt has a fuck buddy in Eric Christian Olsen later, but that goes absolutely nowhere and has really nothing to do with anything. It's literally for a joke, more or less. But basically, long story short, Amy Adams seems to have her head on her shoulders, but the script is also really quick to want to tell us that she actually doesn't, because we've got the guy that she is getting laid regularly with is Steve Zahn, who is actually her ex, who is married to somebody else. And it's more like them basically like reliving glory days from high school whenever they're together. So it's almost like there's a passion there, but there's also a sort of falsehood in it also. And then she's got those post-it notes around that like she basically has to keep reminding herself with like these empty motivational speeches that seem like right off of those posters or whatever. And basically that's what's supposedly keeping her going, but she's clearly crumbling very quickly. She also has a maid job that's pretty much sucking the life out of her, especially when one of her clients is somebody from high school that used to envy her, who now has this really big, extravagant life while she's just the one that cleans this house. So obviously she's, just as dead end as her sister, even though they seem, at first, in, like, totally opposite directions of the success spectrum. So this seems like an easy enough pitch to take these two sisters and to say, yeah, they're gonna clean up, grisly crime scenes and, laughter will ensue. We'll have moments where Blunt is, like, so grossed out by the mattress that she pukes, but yet when they're carrying it around in this particular scene, she's going to trip and fall onto it. And it's going to be stuff like that, basically. Which sets it up to be the comedy angle that they are going for a little bit. But, as I said, the movie's got a lot that it wants to do, and a lot of drama that it wants to cover. Also by inserting, we're going to kind of stay in that indie territory, because obviously they're really plugging the producer of Little Miss Sunshine on the cover, where it was kind of seemingly trying to capture a similar sort of indie feel, and also sort of a juggling of comedy and drama, the way that movie did also. But they go the extra mile, and as I said, they cast Alan Arkin to basically play Edwin Hoover again, his character in Little Miss Sunshine. The guy that's caring, but also, and particularly towards the grandchild, but he also sort of has a foul-mouthed way of bonding with them, and a very kind of lovably aggressive way of bonding with them. Like I said, take out the heroine from Little Miss Sunshine, more or less the same character, pretty much. Not that he can't work with that, of course he can, but it does seem like they're just trying to say, sort of trying to recapture his Oscar-winning part already. because, you know, why fix what's not broken and shit like that. So, and as far, before going into the other problems, I obviously just want to, you know, praise Blunt endlessly, so I'm going to do that now. There are obviously multiple sides to this character. She's easily... I know Amy Adams is like the lead, and she's got all her stuff going on. Particularly her relation with the Arkin character, who is her dad, because of the whole... Their mom committed suicide, and he ended up having to raise children by himself the way she's having to raise her child by herself, more or less. Because Steve Zahn's kind of in the picture there, but might as well not be, pretty much. Except for, like, very rarely. So, with Blunt, we set up immediately in the opening scenes the whole fuck-up angle, and the fact that she's irresponsible and reckless and all of that other stuff. And in case you didn't get that, she's got, like, the black hair and the nail polish and the bracelets and the tattoos and all that to really give you just to really just drive home exactly how we're supposed to feel about this character on first glimpse alone. But of course, in usual Blunt fashion, that is not that surface level because of what she is able to do. I mean, yeah, I guess it's a credit to the writing, but I mean, the way the character's written is very sort of, like, very formulaic, because this... I guess I can go into this real quick before I praise Blunt, but the script does feel, as far as its characters go, very much like you're in a screenwriting class. It would be like Character Development 101, where you lay out these very obvious things, but also them trying to not be so obvious, where it's the whole, you have to have something that grabs the audience, but don't give them everything right away. So they do the mom was in a TV movie playing a waitress thing, where it's this really cryptic thing when they talk about because obviously what we learn is that the mom had always said that she was in, you know, movie of the week thing, and they've been looking for her because they don't quite remember what she looks like, but they know what her one line was. But the way they introduce this before Blunt gets to explain it later, because the screenwriting is so clever, is they're watching the TV movie, and they're like, did the waitress ask if he wanted pie? And they're like, no. And they leave it at that. And it's like, that's what is supposed to make the audience say, ooh, I've got to know what that means. I don't, at least for me, it didn't quite work that way. So as far as the praise of Blunt goes, there is the whole thing of how, like I said, they set her up the way they do in the opening scenes, but we really get these glimpses of her throughout. Like, it's not really something we have to wait for, because every kind of new scene, she sort of is able to throw something in that kind of changes the character up a little bit and shows us at least a little bit of her that we hadn't seen before, which is really great. I really wish Nora was the lead character in this. I really do. And that's nothing that Amy Adams does wrong either. Just Nora is an infinitely more interesting character. So, like, when she first comes over and she's, like, the kid's babysitter, there's something sort of, like, there's something there, the way she interacts with the kid, that really shows a side that we may not expect out of her. Like, at first glance, she looks like the kind of person that maybe would hate kids. But she's, like, really, really amped for this babysitting job, and she's happy that she gets to tell all the stories about lobstermen and licking things, and just all around being a bad influence. But in an endearing way, not necessarily in well, I would say not irresponsible, but then again, he does get in trouble for licking things at school later, which is probably her fault, but that may also just be because he's weird too, anyway. I mean, just because my aunt were to tell me a story about somebody licking things, that would not necessarily mean that I lick things, so that's probably a little something the kid's got going on too. But there's also how I've talked about many times before, but really, I mean, she's just a master of expression, especially in a comedic sense. There's one particular moment that I really love that requires no dialogue until later. She waits till they leave to bring it up, but it's when they first meet Clifton Collins Jr., who has one arm, obviously. And we never really cut to him in this moment, because it's not really a moment that's, like, right in your face. It's just, you just have to watch her eyes to see it. But when they walk up to the desk and they see him there for the first time, when Amy Adams is sort of making small talk and talking business or whatever, or what they need, Blunt's eyes are just looking intently at where his arm should be, and that's all she's looking at. And that's all that joke is in that scene. It's not till when they're driving back that she says, he had one arm, that was so weird. And thinks he's a weirdo just because of that by itself. But then, and obviously throughout, you know, she's going to do the whole sort of quirky and funny thing. And like I said, she gets to do what's, to my understanding, one of her favorite acting techniques ever, which is the puke take. She gets a really nice puke thing going in that one particular scene. But still, there's also kind of a lot obviously going on underneath, which, as I said, the script very tediously shows us, but it's much more entertaining to just watch her do it. So we've got the stuff like I said, the way she interacts with the kid, like how she's able to do that and bring out the dark comedy side of the movie that is something that should have been a lot more prominent than it actually is. Like when they're driving back and they're just having a normal conversation about him being a bastard, but she's like, you know, you're the coolest little bastard ever. And then Amy Adams gets that call about the suicide, and just, he's, obviously it's a suicide, but then just the way she looks at him in that very aunt sort of way and says, no, that's a good thing. And she has that comforting smile about this suicide that's just happened. The movie needed a lot more of that, but it's like, it would give us just little snippets of it, and then it would go a different, more obvious route, or one that was a bit more blatant, really. But as far as it getting a bit more dramatic from her standpoint, there's obviously the connection that she seems to have to their mom that we don't quite see as in-depth as we do with the Addams character. Because she saves all the stuff. She's got, like, the cigarette butts and all that, and she's the one that's been looking out for the TV movie. And then there's one line, I don't know if this is the direction they meant to go, but it's just kind of the way I've taken it. When they go to the very first house where, like, a wife has killed her husband, and they just see the blood splatter on the wall. And the first thing Nora says when she sees this, after she, like, freezes, is, do you think they loved each other? And Amy Adams' response is, yeah. And it's sort of like, I can't help but take that in a way of how the way Nora basically sees their family, where she feels much more distant than everybody else does. She has, like, she and Nora can seem a lot closer, and then she's also, you know, has just a, they're much more seemingly forward about how they feel as opposed to Nora. And it's like, does Nora sort of, like, have this thing when she sees this crime scene, that would be her first question, is like, that when she thinks about, like, family members killing each other, her first thought goes to the love aspect of it, and it's like that, how she views her family. And I don't know how clear I'm making this, but it's, I feel like there's, like, some weird connection there in how she views her family, and that sort of distant way can't help but be connected to the fact that that's the first thing she asks. But then it also turns into a very sad character, and sometimes in these small ways too, like the candy necklace thing. When they're at that party with Eric Christian Olsen, and she's dragged Marilyn Rice Cup there, and they're doing the whole thing where you eat off the candy necklaces, and, like, hers hasn't really been bitten off of yet. And when this is pointed out to her, there's, like, a split second where it looks like she might cry, despite the fact that she seems so emotionally distant from everything around her. And then there's, and because she's there with Eric Christian Olsen, basically, that's how she got there to begin with, was because it was his thing. And it's, like I said, I don't know if it's a script thing that they just did not do anything with that, or if it's playing up the whole, even though they're supposedly close in one way or another, that he might as well be non-existent in her life, practically. So, and in the movie, inadvertently. So there's all that, but then it also gets sadder because of how emotionally standoffish she is, and we kind of start to see why when, like, every time she starts to show compassion somewhere in the movie, and, you know, has empathy in some way, it always ends up screwing her over in, like, a really big way. Like, a really, really big way. Because she finds the personal connection with Marilyn Rice Cup, even though she goes about it in kind of an odd way, but it's, like, it's just the way she would do it, really. where we know, since this whole thing starts with a lie, like, I mean, it starts in like an almost nice comedic way when they're in the elevator and she thinks these expressions are coming out again when she like first gets confronted when she realizes she's following her but lies about it, and then when they get stuck in the elevator and the alarm going off and all that, her saying that she has nice veins. It's sort of this weird thing, but later on, Nora even says, I like weird things, so it makes perfect sense, and she finally has this connection. But we know because it's based on a lie, it's something bad. It's not going to go well. It's not going to end well at all, no matter how much she opens up. But then, once we pass that, she goes to the house by herself to work on it because Amy Adams is at that damn baby shower, and she sees a kitten there, and she has that compassion towards it, and she's like, I have to get it safe. And in saving this kitten, the house accidentally burns down and just completely fucks everything. And it's like, you sort of start to, really see how she got to where she was emotionally when she opens up or when she does something that she feels is the right thing. These are the kind of things that happen to her. And it's really sad and really tragic, especially in the way that she plays it, and watching it happen to her specifically can be really heartbreaking. But that's, you see what I mean? She easily should have been like the main character here, but she's still very, very prominent, but still feels like a side character in Amy Adams' life. There's even something amazing when the scene where her and Amy Adams do make up, and it's like she has almost this. She's such a good actress. She seems to be able to physically, weirdly enough, physically control her tears. There is this. Obviously, I know that can't actually be done, but I mean, if you watch this, where she like has to do the one tear thing before she does like the actual cry, and it's like the tear just sits on her cheek in this perfect way as she talks about the thing that affected her about her mother's death the most, and it's just this. Yeah, I know it's like a happy accident thing, but I mean, still, it just it just goes right along with the praise. It really does. So, as the movie itself tries to go on, we do get some of those moments, like when they try to like humanize the situation after a while, where it starts off as this black comedy where we have, Nora falling into the mattress and all that shit and puking, and they have to clean that up too and all that. But then we get to that suicide that Amy Adams was called about earlier, and with the old woman and how she sits outside with her and all that, and there's just, and then after a while it sort of reaches almost it's almost a full-on drama, like by the second half. And that's, you can see where the tonal issues really are, because I think this really could have worked from the black comedy angle, but I totally see, like when you see the relationship between the two of them, you can tell what they wanted to do with this and where that emotion was. But it really probably would have worked better in the movie's favor if they picked one or the other. Like, more skillfully done movies can easily juggle this stuff, but this one is like, it feels so extreme in one direction, but so extreme in another. It's like, it probably would have, because when you have this opening scene of the dude going in and just like blowing his head off, and that's our opening scene, another one of those Screenwriter 101 things where it's like, have the movie open with a bang, literally. You can just sort of feel the sort of like basic formula at work. But when that does happen, it's almost like they're being upbeat in a way. Like I said, in the way a black comedy would, about how that kind of stuff is treated, and it's kind of jarring when it sort of suddenly becomes dramatic for the rest of the movie, and never really looks back either. Which, yeah, so maybe if it felt like they were juggling a little bit, we might have gotten a little farther with this, but I don't know. But because when it does go into the dramatic areas, it's like, it tries to go into some really depressing areas and some really heavy places. But you top that off with how almost over the top it was feeling at the start about its subject matter. It's like, and I know they do try to introduce like the mom thing early and stuff like that, but I mean it's still jarring and weird when it tries to do both. And there is some stuff that it's like it just kind of glosses over, like the whole competitive angle, like how there's other people doing this and it's a really competitive business. And there's that guy, like Carl, I think is his name, that Clifton Collins Jr. knows. But that's something else that just doesn't really go anywhere at all. But so yeah, so I get that like we do feel for them, especially Nora throughout it. But there's still somehow something about this movie that feels like really hollow. Like I don't know if it's I would say I don't know if it's long enough. It's like just barely reaches an hour and a half. But I don't know what more would have done. It depends on the direction they were going to take it. And the fact that they want to go in so many directions with this and they can't really choose one, I don't know how... I don't know what this could have done to really make all the parts work together, as opposed to just like maybe one or two that work really well and the rest you can imagine working but just really don't, especially together at all. Um, so that's and we, like I said, we have these people that sort of show up and you feel like they should be doing more but they're not. One of those people would be somebody that I've talked about a couple of times before, who is Paul Dooley, who is the guy that gives them the van, who runs a used car lot, which I pray is a reference to Breaking Away, but I'm not really sure. But and obviously the cool thing about that is, because I brag about this as much as I can, he is Paul Dooley is actually from this town. You know this if you watched my Insomnia review when I was doing this with the whole Robin Williams thing, and he was in town for a screening of Breaking Away, and this was, at the time, this was my favorite movie that he was in, so this is what I had him sign. And the thing about that is that he's like, you know, a legend in the business. He's been around forever. Parts like Breaking Away are like immortalized forever in movie history. He's a comedy legend. He worked with like Carol Burnett a lot and stuff like that. But on top of that, and how much of an honor that is, I think back to Sunshine Cleaning when I look at this, and it's like, this is also one degree of separation from Emily Blunt, which is very cool and very exciting. So, so I think that's all I really have to say about Sunshine Cleaning. I wish I could have gone more into Amy Adams, but I do feel like Nora's just really the much more interesting character, so... and like I said, the script feels like it's like all over the damn place, and at the same time feels like sort of... I feel like it'd be pretentious to say amateur, but you know. So as I've said a lot throughout this segment, I don't hate this as much as I used to, as much as I did for the first time I saw it. I think that has a lot to do, though, with my newfound respect for Blunt and her work, and that's because she's what's really keeping this thing alive. So, so yeah, that's basically what this is. So, I think the next one is going to be... oh my god. Oh, The Great Buck Howard, I think. Her other movie with Steve Zahn. So, we'll go right into that. So, that's it for this.